I
Uh-huh.
didn't hit record, or I didn't, I
Now
don't
we're
know.
recording.
Yeah, I just hit record. So I figure at very
Yay.
least we can have a conversation here. And if no one else joins us, then so be it.
Well, so be it. And like realistically, I could like talk about this for ages. If I don't know, part of me is like maybe I could do some two camera information that Josh can use as promo later on,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
so my big thing is game-based learning and using games to
Yes.
teach. So that was the panel that I was on earlier, was the game using role-playing games for history. And so a lot of it does kind of relate back to that character. You know, you're trying to get students to edge out of their comfort zone and play a different character.
Yes. Okay,
Um,
so I will talk straight to camera, like I'm talking to you, Andrew, but you'll be in the camera, so at least it'll look good to record. Um, I was a bad kid. Like I was out on the streets. I didn't want to go to school. I found it boring. I did not feel like I was learning. I did not feel like I could focus. A lot of my ADHD and a lot of my um anxiety as a child made it really difficult for me to focus in a classroom. More or less nowadays students are on Zoom sitting at a computer. I've got a 12-year-old student who just she's working on her worksheets, asks a question, she gets on her phone, figures out the answer, and then puts it in. That's a lot easier than to actually immerse yourself when you're by yourself in front of a screen.
right.
So most people, they don't remember what test they took unless they failed so bad they cried or they got such a good grade they got a reward.
Right. That
They only
emotional trigger.
yeah, right. So
Yep.
there's like this memory that is attached to some personal emotion that will help us retain some information, some memory that we made. And that's what learning is, right?
Yep.
So I think for not only someone like you, but any kind of person out there, whether they're gamers or whether they're not, being able to retain information when it's connected to a personal achievement or a personal feeling is like the only way to kind of consistently learn over time. Even if you can figure out how to use the Zoom for this one class and you do retain one thing, that particular way of learning may not be what you do in 10 years' time.
Right. It's that surface
Right.
level learning versus that deep connection to it.
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys were talking about this on your,
Yep, this
um,
is like I said, a perfect segue, because so the reacting to the past thing, one of the like controversial things is students are playing characters. So you're playing as someone who's in Athens in 403 BC at the birth of democracy.
mhm.
And what the debate is always, are they just playing a role, or are those skills transferable into them?
Yes,
And that's kind of what you're saying, is it doesn't matter what role you're playing, it's still you, it's your emotional
always.
connection. Yeah.
And that connects to me in what I do as an actor is because, people are like, well, where does Fiona go when Fiona plays a character? And my job as an actor is to bring Fiona with me into every character that I play because they become intertwined all the time.
Right, that'd be
You know,
weird to like
I
shelve
can't
that
get rid of
one.
her.
Right. Right,
You
like
know, she doesn't just, I don't just push her away. And I think that's what's happening for students as well, is like there's the character and then the character sits inside of a role. And so if you're playing the character, if you're the character of you, if I'm Fiona, and then I decide to go inside the role of Dracula, right? Then all of a sudden I'm learning how both of those things blend together and connect together, how they differentiate. Then once I go outside of Dracula and I go home and I'm playing Fiona as inside of the role of the daughter to my father, now we're using that same skill that we developed, that same muscle of connecting the character of me to a role, not only in gameplay, but in real life. We've
exactly.
created a muscle memory system where I know how to attach my character to a role and move it into different stories, whether that's at home with my dad, whether that's on the recess playground with my friend, or whether that's as Dracula or as a justice of the
Anything.
peace in the Athens, BC, right?
Right. And I think so much of that is critical because you have the it's almost expected that everybody should just know their voice. Like that's just something
Oh,
that everyone should know. And you don't have that opportunity to play. And so by giving you a role, it's like I'm giving you permission to jump up on the table and yell at me because you're playing a rioter in Chicago
yes.
in '68. And so then all of a sudden the student is like, well, I kind of like that role, that activism, that protester role, and
Yes.
that I can incorporate pieces of that.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, kind of that blend,
Hmm.
the
And I
will it
think that
blend.
that's the thing. I love the fact that you just said not a lot of people know their voice. No one knows their voice. We're not born knowing our voice. We have to express our voice in order to feel comfortable in our voice, which is why it's so difficult and so hard because it requires risk. You have to blatantly do it in order to learn how to do it.
And
And
education doesn't like risk.
no, and I mean any person on the planet, risk in general creates fear. It makes us vulnerable. No one is going to really enjoy it unless they're like a huge adrenaline junkie. And
I
even
just want to
then,
fail in speech.
yeah, yeah, makes me wild.
I've never seen that
Even then,
adrenaline junkie, like public performance adrenaline junkie. That would be a new. I suppose flash mobs.
yeah, and that's kind of, I guess, what I am. I get really excited when someone throws me on a stage and I don't know what to do. I get really excited because then I'm kind of forced to be in this position to figure it out. And I think that in itself is maybe a little bit more rare. Some students don't like to be forced into that position.
I think that's safe to say.
But maybe I wasn't always this way. So I'm not really sure. But every single character isn't just a lot of people can't really, it's hard to differentiate like what is the character and what is the role.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what, the base character that we play as ourselves is always the core character, right?
Have you ever had a hard time where the character you're playing is so different from the base you that you can't transition?
And that's the funny bit, is that I feel like, I mean, we could get real deep here. I feel like I'm a good person. And if I play a role that is innately evil, that is
Right.
on the other end of the spectrum, right? But what we find out about characters is that we are all the entire spectrum. And we don't really know the depth, or say the intensity of our spectrum, until we experience it, until we play in that place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, of course, if I'm a person that hates carrots and I like to be alone in my room and I'm having to play a role where I eat
You're
loads
now
of
Bugs
carrots,
Bunny.
yeah, and I'm
Oh.
running outside, then all of a sudden, yeah, it's not going to be easy. But I think that's the whole key, right? Is that putting us in that place of discomfort that is safe. We're inside of a story with
Right.
a whole bunch of other people that are also going to be put in a space of discomfort. It's kind of like the whole point.
One of the really challenging things about the reacting to the past is the name of like the series of educational LARPs, is a lot of times there's really uncomfortable history, racism. There's Lester Maddox, something that everyone knows, the mayor or governor of Georgia, Atlanta, something like that, during
Mm-hmm.
1968.
Mm,
Horribly racist individual
mm.
is one of the roles in the game.
Oh,
Yeah, but you go, okay, do you whitewash the characters and make sure that we're all
no.
happy, loving? Right. And so you go, someone's got to play it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you kind of have these side conversations with these students of like, it's not you. I know you're not Dracula. I know you're
Yeah.
not this horrible, evil person, but within the confines of this, a lot of times they call it the magic circle.
Mm-hmm.
You have permission to play that role.
Yes.
And don't do this outside of that circle and have
It's the
fun.
same thing as an actor, you can't judge your character.
Right.
That's like number one, acting 101, right? And what I find really interesting about what you're talking about, is that we were understanding empathy in a new light. Empathy for characters that once you have to play them, And even if they're evil, once you bring you to that character, you can see how there may be some good inside of that evil person.
Right.
And
Rarely is the motivation just pure evil. Like I'm doing this because I'm a bad person. There's
yeah,
a
it's
spin.
never the case.
Right. Right.
Never the case. I mean, I love playing villains. That's kind of my favorite, because deep down it's like there's always a motive, like I said, motivation behind what they want. Have you seen The Incredibles 2?
I think so. How long ago though? I don't remember.
I want to say it came out like 2 years ago. So The Incredibles, right? The superhero
Right.
cartoon
Right.
movie came out, and it was so good. But the second one came out, and the bad guy was the sister, to the like
The
the great
kid.
mayor who was helping everyone.
Oh, okay.
And the sister, she was so angry that social media and the internet had kind of taken over everything. And so people weren't being so personal anymore. They weren't talking to each other. And so she wanted to destroy everything because it broke up her family. And it was such a simple,
Right.
easy
From
way
pure
to,
reasons.
yeah, to really empathize with the villain, but then be able to take a perspective, okay, I can see where you're coming from, but this is how I would do it differently. And I mean, that's like the biggest learning anyone could ever do
Right. It's
or have.
Have you ever played D&D?
Yeah.
So it was like that when you first started playing, you would go into a dungeon, you'd open a door, and there would be a monster there. And you
Yeah.
would stab the monster, and then you'd be like, why was there a monster sitting in a room in the dark just waiting for me to open it? Like that doesn't make sense.
No.
And you kind of so as the game and as your play and experience progresses, all of these things start to have stories. They have to have meanings. They have to have reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you go, okay, now the goblin is coming into your camp and stealing your food because they're starving. Well,
Yeah.
now do you kill them? I mean, they're just hungry. Sure,
Yeah.
they're not good, but you can kill them, but
Yeah.
and all of a sudden the gameplay becomes much more interesting and the characters become, there's more to them. They're not one
Yeah.
dimensional.
And we get, as players or as learners, the ability to really sit in our stomachs with moral choice and make mistake like, yeah, I'm going to kill him, and then get the emotional repercussions for that mistake. Oh, well, now that you've killed him, please know that his 6 family members are now going to be coming up and crying to you. And now you feel guilt because you don't know what to do. And that whole experience of going through the motions of making the mistake, feeling the guilt, it's so much harder to do in real life because the
You
risk is
shouldn't.
so much closer, right?
Right. The risk level goes up. You shouldn't kill things like that in real
Right.
life but you do kind of get I don't know if payoff is the right word, but you get to
The
that same
lesson.
yeah, the same emotional experience, I think is kind of what you were
And I
alluding at.
think that's the key, is the emotional experience, making it um bring the emotional experience, bringing everything full circle. Because it's like, unless you go through the stages of grief, when my mother passed away, right? Unless I actually go through the mourning cycle, how am I ever going to grow or bloom past that? Otherwise, I stay stagnant in one of those stages and I don't move because I'm scared to feel. And I think so many people in the world are so fearful of feeling and so fearful of moving from one feeling to another that they get stuck. And once we kind of are able to, and this is a lot of this class would be like I don't know if you've ever played the evolution game.
I don't think so.
I mean, we can play it if you want to. You might hate it.
So
But basically you lay on the floor and you are not alive. You breathe for 5 seconds, imagining you are part of that floor. Okay. It's kind of
like
meditative at
Monday
first.
morning.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I
I'm
wake
part
up
of
and
the
I'm like,
bed.
I am not here. Yeah. But then you go through the process of experiencing birth for the first time, right? So you become aware of things for the first time, aware of yourself, aware of your surroundings, excitement to be able to move, And then eventually you start to walk, you crawl, you walk. And so this is a very exciting
It almost
experience.
sounds like an experiential meditative play.
It is,
Because I know
AKA theater games,
that's a whole different my
you
daughter's
know?
in theater and does a lot of the games and will tell me about these things. And I'm like, that's a really cool mechanic. Like that really leads in. And she'll be like, shut up, Dad. That's just a thing we do in theater.
But they're all related. I mean, really, theater is just one of the original gaming formats,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's narrative play.
It is. It just is. And at the end of the day, there's personal goals and common goals, and there's exercises and mechanics to get us from one space to another. But like we were saying, at this emotional cycle that we go through is so simple, and it really, my own curriculum, I bring it down to awareness, confidence, and letting go. So there's a stage of awareness that people go through, and all of the emotions that awareness comes with.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, uncertainty, excitement, surprise, disgust. All of these things happen when you become aware of something for the first time. Then once you cycle through all of those emotions and awareness, then you're confident. You're confident in those emotions of your awareness. And once you become confident, there's a new cycle of emotions, a new cycle of fear, of your own confidence, of pride,
Self-doubt.
of yes, right?
And that
And
just
then
sounds
one,
like mini bosses. And then you get good at the mini bosses, and then you got the final boss.
yeah, yeah, it very much parallels.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third cycle would be letting go, which has its own section of, or the third section is letting go, which has its own cycle of emotion, which is forgiveness, humility, all of these things that hubris, right? Like turns into humility. And those emotional transitions are things that people can play with emotion, but to transition from one emotion to another in a cycled format is so almost unnatural, because it's more uncomfortable than even feeling the emotion itself.
So can you map those emotions in that process to the hero's journey?
Yes.
I was going to say,
directly.
That's almost perfect. And you go,
it directly parallels the mapping of the hero's journey. Yes. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's a huge part of the curriculum.
Sure.
Is Campbell's stuff.
You just have to have, you can, the external entity, the magic user, the descent into darkness, the return home.
Yes.
And so everyone goes off the top of my head.
Yeah. Yes. But everyone goes through that same cycle, and they experience all of those emotions at different times within the cycle, in its own little mini cycle of emotions in the bigger cycle. Right. And so if people can all kind of be willing to discover, become confident, and let go of their own emotional cycle within this bigger hero's journey, they can parallel those same smaller cycles into every single aspect and or situation in their own life, whether that is dating someone for the first time, going to a social event or party alone for the first time, going to school for the first time, going on a date
challenge.
Yeah. All of those emotional cycles, once you feel comfortable in your own emotional cycle in the bigger picture, that parallels to literally everything.
Well, I think so much of that is just that awareness. So as soon as you get that hook, you can be like, oh, I'm anxious because this is happening, and now I know a process to deal with it. Whereas so much of it, I think, is just when individuals don't know what they don't know. Like, so it's just paralyzing. You're like, something.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Right.
So you're aware of it. Now you're aware of it. Do you know how to experience it? Now you're confident in it. Yes, right. I become anxious. And when I'm anxious, I feel this, this, and this. Now I'm confident in not only am I aware of my anxiety, but I'm confident in my own anxiety.
Right. I've been
And
down this
then,
path before. I know there's a scary cave off on that side. I'm scared every time I come by this path. It's still sitting there. I'm still scared, but I know that I can walk by it.
But then the third portion is, say I have a goal. I have to get to the end of the cave to rescue the princess. So I'm aware that I'm anxious in the beginning of the cave. I'm confident that I will feel anxious. A lot of the time people, me particularly, my character type, I get stuck in the confidence space. And so I'm too busy telling everyone else on the mission how okay I am with my anxiety, that I still haven't rescued the damn princess.
But I'm good with that. I'm good with that. I know
Yeah,
that.
because I'm still forcing myself to be in the confidence zone. So the letting go zone is almost just as important as the awareness and the confidence zone, because we still have to finish the dang mission.
Right. Because confidence without progress
Is
just
literally
ego.
nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there going, I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it,
Yeah.
people like me. I didn't do
Yes.
anything, but
Exactly. And then once you get through that whole cycle, awareness, confidence, and letting go, there's always something new to become aware of again.
sure.
Every time.
Otherwise, you're doing the same mission over and over. You
Yeah.
can go into flow theory and just go how that gets boring if you're doing the same thing. The time or challenge has to increase. Otherwise,
Has to. And it will. It's literal. I think it's almost like, programmed into this simulation of life, is that once you go through that cycle, you become confident, you let it go, you continue your mission, there will be a new awareness to happen. So say you're letting go and you're on your way to rescue the princess, and you've gone through the whole cycle, guaranteed you'll find out something like, oh, the princess already escaped, or there's a new monster to do whatever on the way, but there's something new to become aware of.
I've even seen where a lot of times in gameplay, you'll see like speed runs or specific challenges where you're like, okay, I know this is going to be the same. I've done Mario World 1 a billion times, but now I'm only going to do it with my pinky. And so you find ways to make it harder yourself.
Yes. And there's always some kind of weird segmentation of whatever that happens. Have you heard of John Conway?
The name sounds familiar.
He is he was RIP. He actually passed of COVID. I know, but he was a mathematician professor at Princeton.
Okay.
And he developed this thing called the game of life. And it's basically a 4-rule set on, I can't remember what it's called, like an octagonal grid, but it's basically like this grid.
Okay.
And if every cell of the grid is its own, thing, its own cell, then each cell has to abide by this 4-rule set. The rules were something to the extent of, basically the cells can either be alive or dead. Those are your options. And the 4 rules determined whether or not the cell lived or died. The rules were basically, if there were 2 to 3 neighboring cells that were alive, then it lived. If there were more than 3 neighboring cells that were alive, it died. If there was a dead cell and 2, you know what I mean? So it was very.
I was going to say, this was one of those links that I clicked on at 3 a.m. of a YouTube video of like, and then they had, it seems like it was like 1,000 by 1,000, and they programmed it out, and then they mapped it, and they watched it like live and grow and thrive and die out. And we're looking at sustainability and
and it was just this beautiful algorithm in a sense, or mechanic, that made it to where these simple rules applied to this space, that it just continued to flow.
Right. So you kind of see this dance of like almost like bursts. Yep.
And I kind of think that that's what we are.
So we're just a small little burst.
You're a cell. And I live and die a million times in this lifetime. When my mother passed away and I isolated and I didn't talk to anyone, I died. And then you know, I had a couple of friends, some neighboring cells that were alive that came and brought me back to life.
See,
And that
I
cycle,
like that
it happens
because
over and over and over and over again.
Mhm.
But it's so hard to experience just as me. It's so hard to do. But when we have a game and a character and a mission and a team to play and experience and like the idea of that through, oh my God,
Well, I think
those lessons
that's the
parallel.
hard thing is there's no rule book in life.
Right.
So there's, in games, in plays, in music and dance, there's all of this structure, and there's a choreographer, there's a script writer, there's always someone preparing what should be. And if you want to go, really philosophical, that doesn't exist. You're kind of your own script writer, and I
Yeah.
am my own choreographer, which isn't a good idea for anybody involved. Like if you let me do that, I don't even know what you're going to get, but it's not going to be
I
good.
know. I know. Well, it's the same, right, as like creating your own character. So like say we're going back to like what this workshop is supposed to be today. No one, you don't grow, you don't come out of the womb and they're like, this is how you create yourself to be a person. Right? And education system has tried to do that. It has tried to say you're supposed to learn a language and get a job and then get married and have a baby, and you have done person.
Welcome to level 4.
Yeah. But, I consider myself non-binary. And I have a lot of friends who have gone through so many identity challenges because they haven't had the language or the community that recognized or represented what they felt to be true in themselves, to create the character that they feel is them, right?
Well, you're given a box and you're like, do you fit in this one? Yes or no? Well, do you fit in
Right.
this
And
one?
if you're
Yes
not,
or no?
then you're not a character.
Right.
You're nothing.
We've got a box here and a box here. So
Yeah. So I feel like in the basis of character creation, a lot of the time, if you can imagine a face, even if your face has no eyes, nose, or mouth, but you can imagine a face, no matter what it is, that face a lot of the time will lead the body, right? Because in anything immersive or interactive, especially real life, sound, light, energy outside of us grabs our attention. Most of the time we hear, we see, we smell, we taste. That's all here in this vicinity, right?
Mhm.
And so if something happens over here, I'm going to move this first and then my body will follow. So that's the face. And really being okay, comfortable, aware, confident, and faithful in the face, whatever it is, even if it has no eyes and no ears, just going, that's my face.
Mhm.
And then moving on to the body, right? Trusting that there, whatever happens out here that grabs my senses, my body will follow. Just so the body doesn't, say my face turns, the body doesn't, flop
Suddenly
over.
give up.
And the face can't actually exist on its own. If you chop the head off, the face can't live on its own. The body has to be grounded enough to hold the face. So although the face is directing us to what we want to do, the body holds the face up. So our goal is to be aware and confident in the face, to be aware and confident in the grounding of the body. And I do an exercise where you kind of get like an energy ball and you kind of figure out in your body where is the center of your body. And a lot of the time people hold their center in different places. Some people hold their center in their knees. Some people hold their center in their pelvis or their butt, some in their belly. So it really just depends. And there is no right answer, right?
Right. It's where you want to hold it.
It's where you feel grounded. No right answer. Who cares? So once you have that, now you have like this creation of the physical structure of your character. What is the voice like? And the voice comes from somewhere in the body and out of the face. So now that we have a face and a body, the voice can come from the belly, it can come from the head, it can come from the nose. It doesn't really matter. And once we find where that voice comes from, we can find out how it moves. Because everyone, even if you are deaf and mute, you breathe. And the breath even if you may hold it in your nose, comes from the moves through the lungs, the belly, the head. It continues to cycle. So once you make a face and a body, then you move the breath through the face and the body to find a voice, right?
Okay.
And that may be fast, right? Like if I'm talking to you the way I am, like I'm reading quite quickly. Okay. And
Right.
so even if I was not talking to you, my breath is still kind of energetically and erratically flowing through my body.
Right. You're still
That's my
communicating
voice.
without the voice, without
Mhm.
the sound of the
The
voice.
sound, but I still have a voice.
Right.
It feels kind of strong. It feels a little energetic. It feels a little rambunctious and all over the place. Whether you can actually hear it or not, I can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are like those things. And then the motivation comes from like you were talking about the hero's journey. The motivation comes from what is the external and how does that parallel to the internal?
And is there conflict there, or is there alignment?
Exactly. And that comes that we find one, specific underlying motivation that changes through space. And then each motivation has an intensity. And a lot of people have no idea. Remember you said like when people come out of the womb, they're trying to find their voice. Once they find a little hint of their voice, that voice has its own intensity spectrum. And it doesn't actually have to consider loud or soft, right? Intensity isn't about like volume. It's about harnessed energy. And so I feel like so many people, once they find their voice, they found their energy, right?
And I think that connects right back to the confidence level too, because that confidence is such a foundation of that energy of, I see a lot of times people, when they're just loud, it's very easy to go, you're annoying me.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Right. Whereas
even though you're so loud.
Right. Whereas that confidence, that I don't know, determination or that experience gives so much weight to that that volume, that intensity, that you're like, that's you might be whispering, but I hear that.
But
like
I
it
hear
resonates.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the key. Is I never really thought about it that way too, is like your intensity spectrum is almost your confidence scale, is being able to, once you can harness the ends of your intensity, whether it's right now, I'm just kind of talking to you, I'm not as intense,
But
I'm
I know this because
right.
there's all sorts of nonverbals, and I probably couldn't even enunciate what they all are, but I know that you know what you're talking about. and that adds weight to everything you say.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden, if I wanted to speak with you and I harnessed my intensity and I didn't have to speak loudly, right?
Yep, that's your kindergartner I'm in trouble voice.
You can feel me.
Yeah,
through the screen.
There's teachers that perfect that look, and they go, it's a quick glance, it's in the third row, and all I have to do is do that. And
so direct and harness.
You need to stop whatever it was you were just doing, because things are bad.
Right? And a lot of that is just, you need to focus here now. Period. Right? It grabs you and it isn't that loud. And I think you're right. I think once we learn how to really harness our intensity, we'll be able to get to that confidence. But then you can't stay there. I can't be here every minute of every day. I'll black out.
You should.
Right?
That's not a natural state. Like there has to ebb and flow. There has to be.
And I think that's the same thing as confidence. Like we were saying before, we can't stay in that part of the cycle. We have to go back to letting go and then awareness again. We have to keep moving.
So that's kind of the cycle of learning too, and growth. You're like, if I'm confident in everything all the time, that sounds like a mental disorder.
Something's wrong.
Right?
Something's wrong.
I can do that. You've never square danced before in your life. I don't care. I'm going to try.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of felt like that whenever we first started this little Zoom together. I'm loving this conversation with you.
Yeah. This is, it seems valuable. I'm looking forward to sharing this with others.
I know, Josh, you can cut this up, but it was kind of
Yeah.
like that. We're talking together about something that we both seem to know quite a bit about. We're kind of riffing off each other, feeding each other. And 45 minutes ago, we were like, I don't know how to do this.
Did you click the thing? I don't think I clicked
the button.
Oh, record. Yeah, we should record this.
And eventually we'll have to let it all go.
There's an end meeting button. It'll happen. It guaranteed. We could let this run forever. I mean, we could just try and fill up the internet.
Yeah, but we'll eventually black out.
I don't know. I got about at least a day's worth of food around within arm reach. I could.
I know. I've got a chai latte that I've had for quite some time.
Yep. Survivor Zoom edition.
I know.
I got protein bars and water.
Yeah. Where are you?
Michigan.
Oh, where in Michigan?
Do you know Grand Rapids?
I do.
About an hour north of there. There's a university, Ferris State University.
Okay.
So I
need to get up there again. I lived in Dearborn for 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
When I was in middle school.
You see, you were one of those downstate people.
I know. I know. Down by the thumb.
Yep. That's
those thumb people.
I grew up in Gaylord, which was an hour south of the bridge.
Okay, so you go to Canada.
Occasionally when you wanted to have a drinking age that was under 21.
That's great. That's great. Well, I will come visit Michigan actually sooner than later. So I have your email. I'll make sure we stay.
Yeah, definitely.
This is brilliant.
I'll go ahead. I'll stop the recording and I'll make sure that Josh gets it. And like you said, we'll let him chop it up how he sees fit, or
hopefully he can use it for something.
And if not, this was worth the experience.
I agree.
In and of itself. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
I got to find the button to stop recording. There we go.